Lieutenant Hannah Kim pressed her back against the cold metal debris, trying to control her breathing. The twisted wreckage of what used to be New Sol Colony surrounded her like a graveyard of dreams. 3 days ago, this place had been home to 12,000 human settlers. Now it was nothing but smoking ruins and scattered bones. Her reconnaissance mission was supposed to be simple. Get in, assess the damage, report back to command. But intelligence had been wrong about the timing. The Dominion fleet wasn't supposed to arrive for another 6 hours. Now she was trapped behind enemy lines with nowhere to run. The sound of scratching metal made her freeze. Through a gap in the wreckage, she could see them moving. The Vrex hunters looked like giant insects crossed with nightmares. Their 6 legs moved with horrible grace as they picked through the ruins. Each one was the size of a small car, covered in dark chitinous armor that seemed to absorb light. Their heads turned constantly, scanning with heat sensors that glowed red in the dim light. Hannah's thermal dampener was good, but not perfect. The small device attached to her belt could mask her body heat for maybe another hour before its power cell died. After that, she would light up on their sensors like a beacon. She checked her weapon. 12 shots left in the plasma rifle. Not nearly enough if they found her. The Vrex were tough, and she had seen what happened to human soldiers who tried to fight them head-on. The lucky ones died quickly. A shadow passed over her hiding spot. One of the hunters had climbed onto the debris pile above her. She could hear its breathing, a wet hissing sound that made her skin crawl. The creature was so close she could smell it, a mixture of ozone and rotting meat. The shadow moved away. Hannah waited, counting heartbeats. 100. 200. When she reached 300, she carefully shifted position to look around the edge of her cover. The hunter was 20 feet away, its back turned to her. Beyond it, she could see 2 more searching through what used to be the colony's main street. This might be her only chance. If she could make it to the communication array on the hill, she might be able to get a message to the fleet. She took a deep breath and moved. 3 steps. 5. 10. She was halfway to the next piece of cover when her foot hit a loose piece of metal. The sound rang out like a bell in the silence. All 3 hunters turned toward her at once. Hannah didn't hesitate. She brought up her rifle and fired at the closest one. The plasma bolt caught its center mass, burning through its armor and dropping it to the ground. The second shot hit the one on her left, spinning it around. But the third hunter was already moving, faster than anything that size had a right to be. She dove sideways as razor-sharp claws slashed through the air where her head had been a second before. Her rifle spun away into the rubble. The hunter landed and immediately spun for another attack. Hannah rolled, came up with her sidearm, and put 3 rounds into its thorax before it could strike again. The creature staggered but didn't go down. Ichor leaked from the wounds, but it kept coming. Hannah emptied the rest of her magazine into it, each shot carefully placed. Finally, it collapsed. She was reloading when she heard the humming sound. Every human soldier knew that noise. Neural disruptor. She tried to run, but the weapons field caught her before she had taken 2 steps. Her muscles locked up, and she fell face first into the dirt. Captain Keth of the Vrex approached her paralyzed form, his mandibles clicking in what she assumed was amusement. He was larger than the others, his carapace decorated with scars and kill marks. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding glass. Another human soldier. They fight well for prey animals. He nudged her with one of his legs, testing to see if she was still conscious. This one took down 3 of my hunters before we got her. Impressive. 2 more Vrex emerged from the ruins, carrying equipment. One of them fitted neural shackles around Hannah's wrists. The devices hummed to life, their blue glow pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She could feel them interfacing with her nervous system, dampening her reflexes and strength. Prepare her for transport to Corthax, Keth ordered. The arena masters pay well for exotic specimens, especially ones that show this much fight. The crowds love watching prey animals struggle. They dragged her to a transport that looked like a metal coffin with engines. As the neural disruptor's effects wore off, Hannah found she could move again, but barely. The shackles made everything feel sluggish, like she was moving through thick liquid. The journey to Corthax took 4 days. They kept her in a cell barely large enough to lie down in, feeding her nutrient paste and recycled water. Through the small viewport, she watched stars wheel by, taking her further from everything she had ever known. When Corthax finally came into view, Hannah understood why the Dominion had chosen this world for their entertainment. The planet's surface was covered in red sand and massive stone formations. Towering spires rose from the desert floor, connected by bridges and walkways that gleamed in the light of the system's twin suns. The largest spire contained the grand arena, where warriors from 100 conquered worlds fought for the amusement of their captors. As their ship descended toward the landing platform, Hannah could see thousands of aliens gathered in the viewing galleries. They had come to watch blood be spilled on the sand below. She was no longer Lieutenant Hannah Kim of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Now she was just another gladiator, another source of entertainment for creatures who saw her species as nothing more than interesting animals. But as she watched the red world grow larger through the viewport, one thought kept running through her mind. They had made a mistake bringing her here. They just didn't know it yet. Arena Master Thex slithered across the cold stone floor of the holding area, his 4 yellow eyes examining the newest arrivals. His long, snake-like body moved in smooth coils as he inspected each cage. Most of the creatures inside cowered when he approached, but a few stared back with defiant eyes. He stopped at the last cage and let out a disappointed hiss. Inside sat a human female, still wearing the torn remains of a military uniform. Her dark hair was matted with dried blood, but her eyes were alert and watching everything around her. Humans again? Thex muttered to his assistant, a smaller reptilian creature that scurried behind him on 4 legs. These fragile creatures barely last 2 matches. The crowd gets bored watching them die so quickly. He flicked his forked tongue at Hannah, tasting the air around her. She smelled of fear, but also something else. Something that reminded him of the big predators from his homeworld. Interesting. At least this one survived transport, he said. The last batch died before we even got them to the arena. Weak hearts, I suppose. 2 guards opened Hannah's cage and dragged her out. The neural shackles around her wrists glowed brighter as they activated the transport mode. Her legs went weak, but she forced herself to stay upright. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fall. They pulled her through a series of dark corridors carved from red stone. Other cages lined the walls, filled with creatures from across the galaxy. Some she recognized from intelligence briefings, Kytherian shock troops, Nexus infiltrators, even a few mechanical units that had been captured intact. All of them were here for the same reason. Entertainment. The preparation chamber was a large circular room with a sandy floor. Dozens of gladiators sat or stood around the edges, some tending wounds from recent fights, others simply waiting for their turn to die. When Hannah was pushed inside, every eye turned to look at her. A massive shape rose from the shadows near the far wall. The creature stood at least 9 feet tall and looked like someone had built a tank out of living flesh and bone. Gray hide covered in sharp bone spikes stretched over muscles that bulged like small mountains. When it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding stone. Fresh meat, the Gorlak warrior rumbled in broken galactic standard. His small red eyes fixed on Hannah with obvious hunger. I request this one for my next match. Been long time since I crushed human bones. Several other gladiators laughed. A few made comments in languages Hannah didn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. They all thought she would be easy prey. Hannah sat down against the wall and tested the neural shackles carefully. She flexed her fingers, rolled her shoulders, tried a few simple movements. The devices hummed against her wrists, sending small electrical pulses through her nervous system. Every movement felt like she was pushing through thick mud. She estimated her reaction time was reduced by about 60%. Her strength felt like it had been cut nearly in half. But her mind was still sharp. That would have to be enough. An hour later, the arena master's assistant appeared in the doorway. Human female, it called in accented standard. Your time has come. The walk to the arena felt like a funeral march. Guards flanked her on both sides as they moved through a tunnel that sloped upward toward bright light. She could hear the crowd above, thousands of voices calling for blood and death. When she stepped onto the sand, the noise hit her like a physical force. The arena was enormous, easily large enough to hold 20,000 spectators. Alien faces filled every seat, from small insectoid creatures in the lower levels to massive beings that needed special platforms in the upper tiers. All of them were here to watch her die. Across the arena, a gate opened and her opponent emerged. The Strix assassin moved like liquid death, its sleek black form rippling with barely contained energy. Razor-sharp claws extended from its hands as it tested the air with senses Hannah couldn't begin to understand. This creature had been bred for one purpose, killing quickly and efficiently. The arena master's voice boomed across the sand. Citizens of the Dominion. Today we present fresh entertainment from the human frontier. Will this prey animal provide sport, or will she simply feed the sand with her blood? The crowd roared its approval. Betting screens around the arena lit up as thousands of credits changed hands. The odds were heavily against the human. 50 to 1. Some sections showed odds as high as 100 to 1. The bell rang. The Strix moved immediately, faster than Hannah had expected even with her military briefings. It covered the distance between them in 3 long bounds, claws extended for a killing strike. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation of quick blood. But Hannah had spent 8 years in the Colonial Defense Force. She had trained with the best fighters humanity had produced. And the most important lesson they had taught her was simple: victory wasn't always about being the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes it was about being the smartest. As the Strix lunged with overconfident ferocity, Hannah sidestepped at the last possible moment. The creature's momentum carried it past her, and she used that momentum against it. A quick push at just the right angle sent the assassin crashing into the arena wall with bone-crushing force. Before it could recover, Hannah struck. 3 calculated hits to nerve clusters she had memorized from xenobiology training. The first strike paralyzed the creature's left arm. The second disrupted its balance sensors. The third sent it into unconsciousness. The entire sequence took less than 10 seconds. The arena fell silent. 50,000 alien spectators stared in shock at the human standing over her defeated opponent. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to die quickly and provide brief entertainment. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Then, slowly, a few voices began to murmur. The murmurs grew louder, turning into confused discussions. Someone had just lost a lot of money. Hannah looked up at the arena master's box and gave a small nod. Her message was clear. You underestimated me. That was your first mistake. The whispers started in the lower cells and spread upward through every level of the gladiator quarters. Prisoners who had never spoken to each other began sharing stories about the human in cell block 7. Guards found excuses to walk past her holding area just to get a look at the creature that kept winning when she should have been dead weeks ago. Hannah had lost count of the days since her capture, but her cell neighbor kept track for her. Vex was an old Kytherian warrior whose rocky skin told the story of 100 battles. He had been a gladiator longer than anyone else in the complex, and he had never seen anything like what Hannah was doing. 12 matches, he said through the energy barrier that separated their cells. His voice sounded like stones grinding together. I've seen champions fall in half that time. What are you? Hannah continued her daily stretching routine, moving carefully within the limits the neural shackles allowed. Every morning she tested her range of motion, looking for any small change in what the devices would permit. So far, they remained as restrictive as ever. Just someone who refuses to quit, she replied, rotating her shoulder slowly. Vex made a sound that might have been laughter. I have seen thousands refuse to quit. They all died anyway. You are different. The arena masters are starting to worry. He was right. After her 5th victory, they had stopped putting her against simple opponents. The 6th match brought pack hunters from the rim worlds, 3 wolf-like creatures that worked together with perfect coordination. Hannah had studied their movement patterns during the pre-fight display and found the one weakness in their formation. When they attacked, she targeted the alpha first, disrupting their pack structure and turning their coordination against them. The 7th match was a berserker from the core systems. 8 feet tall and covered in scars, it felt no pain and knew no fear. But it also had no strategy beyond charging straight forward and swinging until something died. Hannah let it exhaust itself against the arena walls before striking at pressure points that would drop even a berserker. By the 10th match, they brought in mechanical constructs. Killing machines built specifically for arena combat, with no emotions to exploit and no biological weaknesses to target. But machines followed programming, and programming could be predicted. Hannah turned their own targeting systems against them, using the arena's obstacles to create blind spots and forcing the constructs to damage each other. Each victory taught her something new about her opponents and about the arena itself. She learned which sections of the wall were weakest, where the sand was deepest, how the lighting created shadows at different times of day. Every detail became a potential weapon. But she also began to notice something troubling about the neural shackles. During combat, they would pulse more rapidly, and sometimes she felt tiny electrical surges that seemed to coincide with her movements. She started paying closer attention to the pattern. The shackles weren't just limiting her abilities. They were recording everything. Her heart rate, her brain activity, her muscle responses, even the way she breathed during different types of combat. Every fight was generating data that flowed back to computers somewhere in the facility. The realization hit her like a cold wave. The Dominion wasn't just entertaining themselves with gladiatorial games. They were studying humanity through her. Every technique she used, every tactical decision she made, every physical capability she displayed was being analyzed and catalogued. They were building a database of human combat capabilities to use in their war against her people. She continued fighting, but now each victory felt different. Every time she won, she was giving her enemies more information about how to kill other humans. But what choice did she have? Lose, and die. Win, and betray her species. It was a perfect trap. The 15th match changed everything. They brought in a pair of Nexus brood warriors, creatures that looked like armored spiders crossed with sharks. Each one was the size of a small vehicle, with razor-sharp mandibles and acid that could eat through steel. They moved with frightening intelligence, communicating through chemical signals that allowed them to coordinate attacks without making any sound. As Hannah entered the arena, she could feel the crowd's energy. 50,000 beings from across the galaxy had come to see if the humans' winning streak would finally end. The betting odds had shifted dramatically over the past few weeks. She was no longer the certain loser she had been in her first match. The fight began like all the others. The brood warriors spread out to flank her, moving with the patient precision of born hunters. But something was different this time. As Hannah dodged their initial attacks and began to counter, she noticed a change in the crowd's behavior. They weren't just watching a spectacle anymore. The usual cheers and jeers had been replaced by something else, a tense silence broken only by gasps when she landed particularly difficult strikes. The alien spectators were leaning forward in their seats, genuinely unsure of what would happen next. For the first time since the arena had been built, the outcome of a match was truly in doubt. The brood warriors were skilled and deadly, but Hannah had fought their kind before during the border conflicts. She knew their attack patterns and their weaknesses. More importantly, she could see that they knew she knew. There was something almost like respect in their movements as they circled her. The battle stretched on longer than any of her previous fights. Both sides probed for advantages, tested defenses, looked for the one opening that would end the contest. The crowd grew quieter and quieter until the only sounds in the massive arena were the scrape of claws on sand and the harsh breathing of the combatants. Finally, Hannah saw her chance. She feinted toward one warrior while actually targeting the other, using a technique she had learned fighting similar creatures on the frontier. Her strike hit perfectly, disrupting the creature's nervous system and sending it crashing to the ground. The second warrior stopped its attack and looked at its fallen partner. Then it looked at Hannah. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the sand. Then, slowly, the brood warrior lowered its weapons and backed away. It was yielding. Surrendering rather than face certain death. The arena fell completely silent for the first time in its bloody history. 50,000 beings sat in stunned quiet, trying to process what they had just witnessed. A gladiator had surrendered rather than die fighting. In 200 years of games, it had never happened before. Hannah stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, as the implications of what had just occurred began to spread through the crowd like ripples in still water. Something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in the way these creatures saw her species. The human who refused to die had become something else entirely. She had become a legend. Arena Master Thex could not sit still. His long, snake-like body moved back and forth across his private viewing booth, scales changing color from deep green to angry red. Every few seconds, he would pause to stare down at the arena floor where maintenance crews were cleaning up after another human victory. 23 consecutive matches. 23 victories for a creature that should have died in the first round. The arena's carefully managed betting system was falling apart. Credits that should have flowed to the house were instead going to the few spectators crazy enough to bet on the human. Even worse, sections of the crowd had started cheering when she entered the arena. His aide, a nervous creature with too many eyes, scuttled up beside him carrying a datapad. Master, the latest reports from the other arenas. 3 facilities have requested permission to acquire human gladiators. They want to study what makes this one so effective. Thex's scales flashed bright orange with fury. Study? There is nothing to study. She is an animal that has gotten lucky. Nothing more. He grabbed the datapad and threw it against the wall where it shattered into pieces. But even as he said it, Thex knew it wasn't true. He had watched every one of her fights. This wasn't luck. The human was learning, adapting, evolving with each battle. She fought like a creature that could not accept defeat, no matter how impossible the odds became. Bring in Commander Zeth, he hissed through clenched teeth. If anyone can put an end to this embarrassment, it's our finest warrior. The aide's eyes widened with surprise. Master, Commander Zeth hasn't fought in the arena for 5 years. He leads the Talon Guard. Surely there are other options. No. Thex's voice was final. The human has defeated our best gladiators, our deadliest beasts, even our war machines. If she is to die, it must be by the hand of a true warrior. Send the message. 3 hours later, Commander Zeth of the Talon Guard stood in the arena's preparation chamber, checking his equipment one final time. He was a magnificent specimen of his species, 9 feet tall with an exoskeleton that looked like it had been forged from black steel. Scars covered his carapace, each one telling the story of a battle survived. Some were from plasma weapons, others from claws and teeth. All of them were trophies of victory. He had not needed to accept this assignment. His position as commander of the most elite military unit in the Dominion meant he could have refused. But the idea of a prey species gaining such notoriety offended his warrior's pride. It went against everything he had been taught about the natural order of the galaxy. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be afraid. They were supposed to die quickly when faced with superior predators. This one human was making a mockery of everything the Dominion represented. In her holding cell, Hannah sat quietly and tried to prepare for what she knew would be her most difficult fight yet. News traveled fast in the gladiator quarters. Everyone knew who her next opponent would be. Even Vex, who rarely showed emotion, had seemed worried when he heard. Commander Zeth, the old Kytherian had said, shaking his rocky head. I have seen him fight. He is not like the others. He is a true warrior, trained from birth for combat. If the arena masters have called him out of retirement, they mean for this to be your last match. Hannah could feel something different about her neural shackles today. 23 battles had pushed her body to limits she had never known existed. The devices were working harder to contain her, pulsing more frequently and generating more heat against her wrists. Her body was adapting to their presence, finding ways to function despite the artificial constraints they imposed. It felt like her nervous system was rooting around the blocks they created, building new pathways that the shackles couldn't quite suppress. She was still far from full strength, but something was changing. Something was building pressure behind the artificial barriers. When they led her to the arena, the crowd was larger than she had ever seen. Word had spread beyond the usual spectators. Beings had traveled from across the system to witness what many believed would be the end of the humans' impossible winning streak. Commander Zeth was already waiting on the sand when she emerged. He stood perfectly still in the center of the arena, his forearms relaxed at his sides. When she looked at him, she could see intelligence in his compound eyes. This wasn't just another mindless brute. This was a professional soldier, just like she had been. The arena master's voice boomed across the sand. Citizens of the Dominion. Today we present the ultimate test. Commander Zeth of the legendary Talon Guard has volunteered to restore the natural order. Will the prey animal finally learn her place? The crowd roared approval, but Hannah noticed something different in the sound. Part of the audience was cheering for Zeth, but another part seemed to be cheering for her. The arena was divided in a way it had never been before. The bell rang. Zeth moved immediately, and Hannah understood why he commanded the Talon Guard. His speed was incredible even by gladiatorial standards. He covered the distance between them in 2 long strides, his primary arm striking with precision that came from decades of training. Hannah barely managed to dodge the first attack. The second caught her shoulder, spinning her around and sending her stumbling across the sand. The crowd gasped as she rolled away from a strike that would have taken her head off. This was different from all her previous fights. Zeth wasn't just faster and stronger than her other opponents. He was smarter. He fought like someone who had studied her previous matches and developed counters for her usual tactics. As the battle continued, Hannah found herself being pushed to her absolute limits. Every technique she tried, Zeth had an answer for. Every trap she attempted to set, he saw coming. For the first time since her capture, she felt genuinely outmatched. The neural shackles on her wrists began to pulse faster, working harder to suppress her body's desperate attempts to access more strength and speed. The devices were heating up, glowing brighter as their internal systems strained under the load. Zeth pressed his advantage, driving her back across the arena with a series of perfectly timed strikes. His movements were like a deadly dance, each attack flowing seamlessly into the next. Hannah could feel herself slowing down, her reactions becoming more sluggish as exhaustion set in. Then something extraordinary happened. Under the incredible stress of fighting for her life against a clearly superior opponent, the neural shackles began to overload. Warning lights flickered along their edges. Small arcs of electricity jumped between the binding mechanisms. The devices were trying to contain forces they had never been designed to handle. Hannah felt a surge of something she hadn't experienced in months. Raw, unfiltered neural activity. Her reflexes sharpened. Her strength increased. The fog that had clouded her thinking since her capture began to lift. The shackles sparked, smoked, and then with a sound like breaking chains, they shattered. For the first time since her capture, Lieutenant Hannah Kim stood completely unrestrained. The transformation was immediate and terrifying to behold. Her posture changed. Her movements became fluid and precise. Most frightening of all, her eyes took on the cold, calculating look of an apex predator that had been playing with its food. The crowd held its collective breath as they witnessed what an unshackled human warrior truly looked like. Commander Zeth paused in his attack, his warrior instincts recognizing that something fundamental had just changed about his opponent. The real fight was about to begin. The silence that followed the shattering of the neural shackles lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Commander Zeth, veteran of 100 battles and leader of the most feared military unit in the Dominion, made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He attacked. His 4 arms moved in perfect coordination, striking with the precision that had made him legendary. Each blow was calculated to kill instantly. Each movement flowed into the next with deadly grace. For 4 to 6 seconds, he fought with every skill he had learned in 30 years of warfare. It wasn't enough. The human that faced him now was not the same creature he had been dominating moments before. Hannah's speed had increased threefold, her reactions sharp as laser fire. She moved like liquid death, flowing around his attacks as if she could see them coming before he even began them. Her tactical awareness had expanded beyond anything he had ever encountered. But what terrified him most was her eyes. There was no rage there, no desperation, no fear. Just cold calculation. The look of a predator that had been playing with its prey and had finally decided to end the game. On the 47th second, Hannah struck. A single blow to a nerve cluster that Zeth didn't even know existed. His exoskeleton, which had turned aside plasma bolts and energy blades, might as well have been paper. The commander of the Talon Guard collapsed to the sand, unconscious before he hit the ground. The arena erupted. 50,000 beings from across the galaxy screamed, roared, chittered, and howled their shock. Many had never seen Commander Zeth lose a fight. Some had never seen him take a serious hit. The betting computers crashed as the odd system tried to process what had just happened. Hannah stood over Zeth's fallen form for a moment, then turned toward the arena gates. The transformation in her bearing was complete. She no longer moved like a prisoner or a gladiator. She walked like someone who owned everything she could see. The first guards to try to stop her were a pair of Vrex hunters, the same species that had captured her months ago. They raised their weapons and advanced with the confidence of creatures that had never met their match. When Hannah looked at them, they froze. Something deep in their predator brains recognized a superior hunter. Without a word, they stepped aside. More guards appeared as she walked through the complex. Dozens of them, representing species from across the Dominion. All of them had weapons. All of them had orders to keep gladiators contained. But one by one, they chose not to fight. There was something in the way she moved, something in her presence, that made violence seem pointless. Arena Master Thex received the reports in his private booth with growing panic. "She's doing what?" he hissed at his aide. "How is she walking free? Where are the guards? Where are the containment fields?" The aide's many eyes blinked rapidly. "Master, they're not stopping her. The guards are just letting her pass. Even the automated systems seem to be malfunctioning." Thex slithered toward his private exit, planning to escape to his ship, but stopped when he realized where the human was heading. The central chamber. The heart of the complex where his greatest champions waited. If she wanted a fight, she would find one there. The central chamber was a circular room carved from solid stone, designed to showcase the arena's finest warriors. 12 of the deadliest beings in the galaxy stood around its edges, creatures who had earned their freedom through countless victories but chose to remain as elite guards. They were Thex's insurance policy, his final line of defense against any threat. When Hannah entered the chamber, they all turned to face her. Weapons appeared in hands, claws, and appendages. These weren't common gladiators or simple guards. These were champions who had never known defeat, killers who had earned their reputation with blood and bone. At their center stood Arena Master Thex himself, his serpentine body coiled for battle. "You think you can just walk out of here, human? You think breaking your shackles makes you free? I have 12 of the finest warriors in the galaxy. You are still just one small prey animal." Hannah looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each champion in turn. She recognized some of them from their legendary arena battles. Others were new to her, but she could read their capabilities in their stance, their breathing, their micro-movements. The first to move was not one of the champions, but Vex, the old Kytherian warrior who had been her cell neighbor for so many months. He stepped forward from where he stood near the wall, his rocky skin scarred from 1,000 battles. In his massive hands, he held a weapon that could crack mountains. Slowly, deliberately, he placed it on the floor at Hannah's feet. "I yield to the stronger warrior," he said simply. The other champions stared at him in shock. Vex had been their leader, the oldest and most experienced among them. If he was surrendering without a fight, what did that mean? One by one, they began to understand. This wasn't about weapons or armor or even numbers. This was about recognizing something fundamental about the nature of predators and prey. The human standing before them wasn't just another gladiator who had gotten lucky. She was something entirely different. A Nexus Brood warrior was next, placing his bioweapons beside Vex's club. Then a Strix assassin laid down her claws. A mechanical construct powered down its weapon systems. Soon, the floor around Hannah was covered with the tools of war, surrendered by beings who had never known defeat. Arena Master Thex watched in horror as his champions, his insurance policy, his final defense, all chose submission over battle. "What are you doing?" he screamed. "She's just one human. Kill her. That's what you're here for." But none of them moved to attack. They had all reached the same conclusion that Vex had voiced. In the presence of a true apex predator, the wise choice was yield, not fight. When the last weapon hit the floor, Hannah looked at Thex and nodded once. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. The champions parted before her like a living corridor, heads bowed in respect. As news of the event began to spread beyond Corthax, carried by traders and diplomatic couriers to every corner of the galaxy, the Dominion leadership faced an uncomfortable truth. The humans weren't just another species to be conquered and enslaved. They weren't prey animals to be hunted for sport. They were something the Dominion had never encountered before in their long history of conquest. They were a species that became more dangerous when cornered, more deadly when restrained, more formidable when underestimated. The galaxy's newest apex predators had announced themselves, and they were no longer fighting in shackles. In council chambers across Dominion space, military leaders began to ask questions they had never considered before. If one human could do this, what could 1,000,000 do? If their weakest could break free from neural shackles, what were their strongest capable of? For the first time in their empire's history, the Dominion began to consider the possibility that they might have made a terrible mistake. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted in ways no one could have predicted. The prey had become the predator, and the hunt was about to begin in earnest.